Awareness is attention to certain human experiences. How do we start philosophical investigation? We start from the way we experience the world. The center of the Sermon of the Mount is to change the human heart. Battle of the New Testament is the human heart that has to be changed by the grace of Christ.
Hello friends of Collegium Wojtylianum. Today we have a special guest with us, Father Jarosław Kupczak of the Order of Preachers. He's returned to us so we can get back to a topic that many of you were asking about, theology of the body. We got into it a little bit the last time Father was here, but now we have a plan and we're going to talk extensively about this. Are you ready, Father Kupczak?
I am.
All right. So our idea is we're going to have 4 small movies about this topic for you guys to be able to see our discussion in smaller pieces, because Theology of the Body is a very dense book and it has very complicated ideas. So we're going to try to take them apart piece by piece so that you can think about it later at home. You can rewatch it on your own time and you can get to know this book a little bit more. Okay, Father, today's first topic, we're going to discuss the first things in the discussion of theology of the body. So for you guys at home, we're going to look at what is human experience, what is human awareness, and what are the gospel values of the human heart. Let's go. So Father Kupczak, what can you tell me about Karol Wojtyła's understanding of human experience?
Human experience is a very, very broad topic in the thinking of both Karol Wojtyła and John Paul II. During our last conversation, we talked a lot about that the philosophy of Karol Wojtyła is very clearly present in his theology of the body. And the notion of experience is one where this philosophical influence is very much present. Why? Because philosophically, Karol Wojtyła provided a certain synthesis between traditional metaphysics and modern 19th and 20th century phenomenology. So we have to remember that experiencing the world, experiencing the ethical values, experiencing ourselves, experiencing our other people is one of the most important notions in phenomenology. So when Wojtyła, John Paul II, talks about experience in theology of the body, what he wants to say that with this very modern philosophical tool, very modern philosophical notion, we can rediscover the traditional truth. What is most significant about human experience? In the theology of the body, Wojtyła concentrates on human experience as access to what I call the traditional truth about human nature, or traditional truth about human person. The most important truth about human experience is that it's always subjective, but it's not subjectivistic.
Can we get into this? What do we mean by this?
Human experience is always subjective. Why? Because it's always an experience of a concrete person. Mm-hmm. It's my experience. It's my experience of, for example, our conversation. It's my experience of myself. It's my experience of the world. It's experience of a subject. But it does not mean that my experience, and of course you have your own experiences of the world and also of our conversation, of our encounter. However, it does not mean that those two subjective experiences are relativistic or subjectivistic. In other words, there can be and this is very important for Wojtyła's theology of the body, there are subjective experiences of the human person that have objective value. In other words, humans, by the way of own experiences, who are always an experience of a concrete person, concrete subject, which is subjective, humans have access to a certain objective content of the human experiences. This objective content of human experiences discloses to us the truth who we are as men and women, as women.
I'm going to interrupt you there and ask you, what could we give as an example of the subjective experience? Because in the beginning you gave a great example, like this conversation. I'm having my subjective experience of this conversation, you are as well. We each have a subjective experience of these glasses of water, but what would be objective?
Yes. Wojtyła, John Paul II, in his Theology of the Body, he builds theology of the body on the objective experiences of the human subject. Where does he find those objective experiences? Well, he thinks that if we read carefully with this phenomenological attention, phenomenological awareness, the Holy Scriptures, for example, the second description of creation, that's where we find the objective experiences of the human person that are trans-historical, because they refer not just to a specific part of the human history, but they refer to objective truth about the human person. Let me give you an example. The first, there are, if we read Genesis 2, there are plenty of examples of that. The first one is loneliness, solitude, right? Solitude is always a personal experience, but we are aware that solitude at the same time, which is experiential discovery of who I am. Every human person knows solitude, knows loneliness. So it's always a subjective experience, but solitude is an objective phenomenon, right? Every human person knows it. We can say that the definition, in a sense, of the human person is somebody who can experience being lonely in a much more profound way than it could happen with animals or with other beings. So loneliness would be first. Secondly, a friendship. Every human person knows the bond with the others, the happiness of being bound with the others. So it's a subjective joy, but it refers to objective phenomenon. The third very profound experience that Wojtyła concentrates on in the Theology of the Body, John Paul II, is shame. Shame, mentioned in Genesis 2, is a subjective experience that provides access to certain very important truth about who we are. So, subjective experience that opens the door before us to some very important objective truth about human person, what in the past, in the metaphysical language, has been called the human nature.
I think with this shame, can we imagine when Adam and Eve realized that they were naked?
Yeah.
And this shame kind of opened their eyes to other realities about their existence. Father, this brings us into the next point, which is what are the gospel values of the human heart? But what I want to do first is go a little bit off topic, because you've mentioned several times 2 points, and I don't know how many of our followers are aware of these points. So could you please discuss in a little bit of greater detail what is phenomenology and what are metaphysics? I know that these are both courses in their own that you could probably teach a whole semester about, but how could we say these in summary?
Let's start with metaphysics, because this is one of the most ancient languages with which humans speak. Metaphysical language, metaphysical approach to reality started really in ancient Greece with Greek philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, searching for a philosophical language with whom they could describe the whole of reality. In other words, in my class, I give the example that today we are accustomed to the languages of modern science. But any of those languages, let's say the language of psychology and the language of the language of physics or biology, they refer to only a specific kind of phenomena. If we ask a psychologist about what he can say about this table in front of us, a psychologist would say, sorry, but this is not my domain of interest. I am interested in human psyche, in the human mind, not in the table. But if we ask somebody who works in physics what he can say us about the table, he will say a lot to say. But then he would say, I can't say much really about human feelings or human emotions, because that, in other words, Greeks ask the most important question, is there a language which we can apply to everything that exists? And with Plato, especially in Aristotle, they realize that this language that can be applied to everything that exists, it has to be a language about being itself. So metaphysics is analysis of everything that exists, but from the point of view of the analysis of the being itself, toon in Greek.
As always, a very easy discussion. I'm sure we could breeze through this, but we're going to the next question, which builds on this. So we talked about being with metaphysics. So then what about phenomenology? What can we say about this?
Phenomenology is a modern way of conducting philosophical investigation. It was created in the second part of the 19th century by German philosopher Edmund Husserl, who basically was frustrated with the moment in which the European culture and European philosophy found itself. Husserl was convinced that we are in a blind alley in the 19th century, and in a sense we have to start philosophy from the beginning, going back to Greeks and concentrating on how starting philosophy from the beginning. How do we start philosophical investigation from the beginning? We start from the human experience. We start from the way we experience the world. In other words, a methodological concentration on human experience provides us access to a certain reflection of what is around us. So that's why phenomenology, phenomena, is the way we experience the reality. So phenomenology becomes a method to describe human experience and analyze human experience. Going back to Wojtyła, John Paul II, he combined those two languages that we talked about. Of course, as a Catholic philosopher and Catholic theologian, he was trained in the metaphysical language. as a poet, with a great joy, he discovered 20th century phenomenology, especially through the work of the German philosopher Max Scheler. This method of phenomenology provided a wonderful tool for a poet, an actor, Karol Wojtyła, to talk about human experience. So, to sum it up, in phenomenological method, Wojtyła found a wonderful tool to talk about subjective experiences of objective human reality. Phenomenological method provided access to objective metaphysical truth of the human nature.
So I wonder if we can say, in a little bit as a summary for our viewers, like phenomenology picks up where metaphysics leaves off, and Wojtyła took both of them together to interpret the world.
We can say that.
Okay. Whew, that was a lot to think about. So then the final question is, oh no, I don't think it is the final one. What can we say about awareness?
Awareness, I don't exactly know which part of the theology of the body you refer to. Awareness for Wojtyła, on the one hand, is a phenomenological attention to certain human experiences, right? So it's a concentration on what's important in us from the phenomenological point of view. I think that this is how far I would go with this notion.
This is exactly what we needed. And that leads into the final point, which is, what are gospel values? And then how can we relate these to the human heart?
Yeah, values is a subject in itself in the theology of the body. Why? Because value, also ethical value, it's a very modern concept that really started in philosophy in the Western culture in the 19th century. In the past, where we speak today about values, in the past philosophers spoke about goods. What's the difference between values and goods? Goods belong to the metaphysical construction of the reality. So goods are objective. Values, on the other hand, are subjective. Values are something that we experience, that the human person is experiencing. So, first thing that should be said about human values is that Wojtyła, in his philosophy, and it's very clear in the theology of the body, provides a synthesis between old traditional notion of good, which is metaphysical in character, and the modern notion of value, which is phenomenological, experiential. In such a way, Wojtyła is able to ground the notion of value in the objective order of reality. So metaphysics, metaphysical notion of good, provides an objective context in which we can speak about values. Values become then an aspect of good as we humans experience them. And this is the window. This is the entrance through which Wojtyła is able to look at the Gospels, especially at the Sermon on the Mount. When John Paul II in his Theology of the Body speaks about the Sermon of the Mount, he speaks about ethos of the heart. Why ethos of the heart? Because in John Paul II understanding, it's the heart on which Christ concentrates in the Sermon on the Mount. In the past, in the Old Testament commandments, the attention was directed toward humans' external behavior, what we do. Christ is interested not only what we do, but who we are inside, because the center of the Sermon of the Mount is to change the human heart. So the battle of the New Testament, the main battle place is the human heart that has to be changed by the grace of Christ. That's why ethos of the heart is so important in the New Testament.
Thank you so much, Father. So guys, where does that leave us? Talking about phenomenology and metaphysics as briefly as we did gave us a window to understand Wojtyła's philosophy. Looking at ideas of the human experience, awareness, the gospel values, and the human heart set the foundation for where we're going with the rest of the theology of the body. This is a foundation that's necessary in order to understand the discussion that's going to come next, which we invite you to come back next week and to view that video, as we will be talking about issues of respect towards the body, and spirituality. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. Thank you, Father Kupczak.
Thank you very much.